Welcome to Rock and Metal Songwriting, where I help you go from riff ideas to fully finished songs. I'm Quincy Kane, and this is day number 10 of my 20-day songwriting question challenge. Today's question is, what's the typical structure of a rock or metal song? So we're going to dive into that in a bit, but if you've got a question yourself, feel free to leave a comment and I will get to it near the end of the stream, which the stream's only going to be about 10 or 20 minutes. So near the end of that, if you submit a question, I'll get to it and I'll do my best to answer it for you. But for now, let's focus on this one. What is the typical structure of a rock or metal song? So when we're talking about song structure, we're basically talking about the beginning, the middle, and the end. You know, you don't just start making music. I mean, you can have your song kick off, just be like, bam, just explode, and you're just right in the midst of the song. No setup, nothing. You can do anything you want. That's the main thing to remember. When we're talking about anything with music, it's pure creativity. You can do whatever you want. But structure is really helpful because it gives a sense of clarity of what people are actually, of what you're trying to express with your music and what people are hearing and how they can actually connect with it and make sense of it. So that's the difference between it just sounding like random chaotic noise versus sounding like an actual song. Structure typically helps the music feel like it's going somewhere. It's taking the listener on a journey. It's telling a story. Structure gives the music and the sound a little more intent rather than just randomness or chaos or mess. And structure, therefore, can make a song more pleasing to listen to, more satisfying to listen to, and also more memorable. It helps, again, if we're being distinctive with structure, it means we have distinctive sections. And so we as the listener can understand, oh, we're in the verse. I can tell this is the verse because of the structure or because of the presentation of the music. And I can hear, oh, something's changing. It sounds like it's building up. This must be the chorus. We can tell where we're at in the song based off of the structure. So the truth is there's a lot of different structures you can do with metal, especially rock or metal, depending on what kind of style you do. A very common one is, I go back to this. Pretty much any song, any popular song is going to follow this structure here, which is verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. That's extremely common. But it does depend on the style, and you don't have to follow that style. There's no rule that says you have to follow that structure. But let's start simple. Let's start with something simple, and then later we can branch out and experiment, especially if you're getting into more technical styles of music. If you listen to, if you're hoping to write progressive or technical metal or even certain styles of metalcore, it's very common that they have a structure that sort of evolves and tells more of a story. So we'll get into that. But first, very common structure is just verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. So, any song that you're going to listen to, and I would say those are kind of the main sections, but even then, you might have transitions going into those sections. You might have certain transitions that set up those sections. So, whenever you're writing a song, you don't always start at the beginning. You don't always come up with an idea, and just because it's the first thing you came up with doesn't mean, oh, this must be the intro of the song. It might be, but you might have an idea that it's like, no, this sounds like a great chorus, and then your job as the songwriter is to figure out, well, how do we set up the chorus? How do we get to this point in the song? And that's where structure comes in. Structure is super helpful because you can look at the parts that you already have and then map out, okay, what am I missing? It kind of gives you, it tells you what to do next. It tells you, oh, here's what I'm missing. I've got a great chorus, but I need to write a verse to set it up. And then, okay, I've got the verse and the chorus, but I still need a way to start the song. I need an intro. And then once you've got all that, you say, okay, well, the song's basically done, but how do I want to end it? That's the great thing about structure. It gives you a sense of direction in your songwriting to know where to go with the song so that you can clearly define how the song starts, where the song ends, and how to know when your song is actually done. So, just for example, I'm just going to use like a song I wrote, but let's say I wrote a riff like, let me play that correctly. So that might be my idea. And when I first have that, I might not know what that is. Is that a verse? Is that just an intro? Is it a chorus? And so you have to mess with it for a while, but I'm going to give you the short version. I decided that would be the chorus. I came up with this melody that to me sounded like a statement. It sounded like, all right, this sounds like the big part of the song. It's someone, just show me some love and tell me that I got enough. So when I could imagine that, I could imagine the intense drums and the band playing full and loud. I was like, all right, this sounds like a big moment in the song. That's my chorus. But how do I get into that? You know, how am I going to go in there? I need a verse. I need something to happen before. So since that's really big, usually the verse is going to be a bit more condensed. So I came up with this little pattern here, this. But what's interesting is even that idea, I had different ways of playing that. I could play it a little more intensely, like... or I could just do all palm mutes, which sounds a little more contained. And I found out that I was able to use both. I could use the more open technique as sort of an intro. So let's say, yeah, I kind of play it as an instrumental. And then when the singing starts, it goes more contained. I once believed I could be anything. Took a chance and chased a dream. Never realized. And I just kind of, sang, so it sounds a bit more contained. But it didn't sound ready to go into our chorus yet. It sounded cool, but then we want to start building intensity. So I actually have a pre-chorus. I have still the same structure as the verse, but now it's starting to build up in intensity. It's kind of creating tension, but it hasn't fully exploded yet, And the vocals start going a little bit higher, and so it's building this anticipation. That eventually hits a breaking point and leads into the chorus. But hopefully you can understand how we're just problem solving. I started with that chorus. Okay, I have this big moment, but I need something small first, and this small moment needs to build up to transition into that bigger moment. And then we got to get back to the verse. So once that chorus ends, and that's when I came up with just I'm playing the verse riff, but I'm playing it a little more aggressively. I'm hitting those open notes. And then verse 2, go back to the palm mutes. So it's a little bit of just problem solving, of just saying, okay, here's what I have, here's what I'm missing. What do I need to write to fill in the gaps? And that's how you kind of figure out your song. So, all right, I've got verses, I've got choruses. All right, I can be a little more specific. Well, now how do I want to start the song? And what I decided was that the chorus would be a good way to start it. Like, just come in big. I think the song starts with just a single guitar. And then the drums kick in. And the whole band kicks in, just playing instrumentally. And then pause. I once believed right into that verse. So again, just problem solving, just saying, all right, the chorus works as an intro. You can have the band kick in, this big explosive kind of little, like a little taste of what's to come, but then it goes small again and we get into our verse. And then as I demonstrated already, the verse just progressively gets a little more tense, starts to build up until it explodes into the actual chorus with the vocals. From that chorus, we transition back into the verse again. So we've almost got a whole song. Play the verse again, similar pattern of just building up tension to chorus 2. And then the last thing is, all right, now we need a bridge. Where do we go from here? And there's a lot of things you can do with your bridge. For me, I decided to go the heavy route, to go with a breakdown. So after that chorus, it's going to pause again, but instead of doing the sudden pause, that's what it did for the intro, and that's what it did for the first chorus. I let it ring out. And then I let the bass come in. The bass starts playing this little, let's see. there's this little bass line. It's just the bass playing. So we're starting to build tension. And then once again, it builds up. And then we get into this breakdown riff. So this is working. But is this going to go back into the chorus? Let's find out. Yeah, you play from that riff and then you go right back into the chorus. And in the actual song, it goes to just a single guitar because we went from this big breakdown, so we go to a single guitar. And then once again, the band kicks in because that contrast really helps. That's the thing too, is when you're creating structure, you want to create... You want the transition to be obvious. You want it to be known that, okay, we're in a new section now. And a big way you can do that is from contrast. So if you're trying to get from one riff to another, if the whole band's just playing the whole time, it might be a bit much. Sometimes just simply cutting to a single guitar to just kind of set up the next section and then having the band kick back in, that can work really well. Or having some piece of music, again, going kind of soft first before coming in big. It's that contrast, that difference of loud and quiet that gives each section a little more identity. Like, it helps them to be more distinguishable from each other. So you're not just going from one loud section into another loud section and then everything just kind of sounds the same and runs together. You need to have those little breathers in there, those breaks that give the listener a sense of continuity of where they're at in the story, where they're at in your song. So hopefully that makes sense. After that last chorus, then you just kind of have to write a way to end it. For me, I ended up letting it ring out again and then going back to the verse, but going with like a crunch tone and doing this kind of soft ending. And it just kind of felt like it sort of left it with like a little bit of unresolved, like I wanted that, a sense of unresolved tension. So I'm using that song as an example, but you can do the same thing with your song, is you look at the parts that you have and then already having a structure in mind, knowing that, okay, I'm going to need a verse. Since my chorus is so loud, what would be a good setup for the chorus? How do I get from the verse to the chorus? And you're problem solving that. You're building that. And once you have that transition, you say, okay, well, how do I start the song? How am I going to get into that first verse to begin with? You might start right with the verse. You might use the verse as like a loud intro first and then go quieter once the vocals kick in. You might use the chorus as an intro like I did and then go quiet into your verse. There's different ways you can start a song, but the point is what structure does is it gives you an outline. It gives you a target to aim for. Now, there's no rule that says you have to pick a certain structure and then stick to it. There have been several times. Usually when I write, I almost expect I'm going to write verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. But there have been many times where I'll write a song and sometimes it doesn't need a bridge. The verse and the chorus are kind of enough to fill it. And maybe there's a guitar solo, but the song's already long enough. And it's just like, you know what? This doesn't really need a bridge. Or one of my personal favorite structures, sometimes I'll go into the bridge and it feels like a turning point for the song and it doesn't feel right to return back to the chorus. Sometimes the bridge can almost... You can extend it and just play it a little bit longer, and it almost works as an outro or kind of like the send-off for the song. So that's a favorite structure of mine, doing verse, chorus, bridge, and then having the song end with the bridge. Sometimes that can be really cool. Now, if you are wanting to do something a little more less common, you're wanting to do a structure that kind of progresses. Again, if you listen to a lot of metalcore, I've got a song that has this... this intro, it kicks in with the main riff. It's playing this melody over top of this. And then it goes into kind of this verse riff, and it sort of picks up. I'm realizing I'm trying to use this as an example, but I kind of can't because it's an instrumental. And so there's one part that has a melody. Let's see. But it kind of picks up to this very fast, sort of adventurous feel, and then it goes dark. It's almost like trouble's coming, like, oh no, the fun's over, and then it goes into this kind of more breakdown riff. Here's like the boss fight, you know. But you can say, by the way I'm describing each section, it's like it tells a story. And so there are styles of rock and metal that do that, where they don't have a clear verse or a clear chorus. They don't return back to sections. It's almost like the song progresses or evolves as it transitions. And the key to making that work is dynamic and contrast, not just contrast in loud and quiet, but also in the emotional tone of your music. So like I was describing there, the very beginning, it's kind of this very big, like powerful, punchy intro, and kind of a slower beat, like more of a breakdown kind of beat. And then it picks up at double times, and you get in this very like fun, adventurous, like fast-paced, let's go, the adventure started kind of thing. But then it doesn't just go from that to then another fast-paced adventure thing. It goes to sort of a darker turn. And notice where I'm playing at the guitar. I'm going from these power chords to then these really, you know, kind of up on this end of the guitar, and then down to these really chunky. And then after the chunky chords, I go to these single notes. And that helps distinguish each section from each other. You know, if you write just one chunky riff, and then you go into another chunky riff, and then another like if you're just doing chunky riff after chunky riff after chunky riff, it's just going to sound the same, and there's not going to be a clear distinction of where you're at in the song. So trying to write on different places of your guitar and trying to create different emotional tones, it also makes those riffs hit harder. Like if you want your breakdown to hit hard, you've got to set it up. You need something smaller or something lighter, something that's not so heavy first, so that when the heavy part comes in, it hits hard. The contrast is what's going to do that. And as you're writing, you're just really telling a story. And you might even feel that you're discovering the story as you write it. You might not know where it's headed, and you just kind of follow it as long until it feels like, all right, I feel like we're reaching an ending here. And just like we said with the other song, you're trying to write with intention. You're saying, okay, we've had our heavy moments, we've had our light moments, but now I feel like we're reaching a finale. I need to write a big finale, and then how do I want this to end? You're making intentional decisions about what kind of story you want to tell and where you want the story to begin, where you want it to go, and how you want it to end. And so that's really important to do. Again, you want to avoid the structure is the thing that keeps you from sounding like a local band, you know. And when I say local band, we've heard those bands where they're technically playing music, but right when the song's over, you already forget what it sounds like, and you know, maybe their riffs just kind of sound like a riff salad, like they just took a bunch of random riffs and threw them together, and they call it a song, but there isn't really much that's memorable about it. And so if you want to avoid that problem with your own music, it's important to be distinctive with the sections of your song. Have some kind of structure. Again, if you're doing that storytelling, it might not be verses and choruses, but you can think of each section as a moment in the story. You've got the intro. How are we setting up the story? You've got the fun part or the thrilling part of the story, and then you've got the downfall, like the pit of the story. You've got the contrast or the conflict, and then you've got sort of the overcoming or like building up tension, and you've got the big epic finale, and then how are you going to end it? You know, you might have the loud moments and the quiet moments, but the point is that you're being intentional about the moments that you're creating. So either way, that's kind of what I have to say about song structure. And again, even if you're watching this on the replay, if you've got questions yourself, feel free to ask them. If you have any tips yourself about song structure, go ahead and leave a comment. But that's going to be our question for today. I hope you found that helpful. If you'd like to take your songwriting to the next level and you're interested in working one-on-one with me, there is a link in the description to apply for a free coaching call. That's going to be all for today. Until next time.